Good morning, everybody. We are still waiting for a couple of the national executives to get here, but we're going to kick off. One thing we were going to do in the first session is we were going to have some introductions to what various parts of the party are actually doing. And so we've got 4 of these presentations ready to share with you. They're about 10 minutes each. So my name's David Wood, as well as Chair of London Futurists. I sit on the National Executive, and I'm responsible for something called the Treasury Department. So I'd just like to spend a few minutes introducing this. Before I got involved in politics, I had no idea that there were all these kind of rules and regulations about how political parties operate, but actually now that I look at it, it makes good sense. So the Treasury Department is about managing, say, the party's finances. All of you who have joined have given us at least £25, some cases more, and you have obviously a desire that we manage that sensibly. We also have the obligation to manage not just the money, but manage the fact we keep records of the money, and we report in broad terms to an independent organisation, which I'll tell you about in a minute, which oversees all political parties in the UK to make sure that there's a broad level playing field and there isn't a subversion, there isn't violations of major financial rules. And the third thing we do in this department is we're responsible longer term for raising more funds for other kinds of projects. So some of this is driven by legal obligations, and I've written this in red. I remember when Dirk told me, the Treasurer might be put in prison if we fail to follow the regulations or if we report things incorrectly. I thought, do I really want to be the Treasurer of the party? But hey, I've been a company director for 20 years, and I know always that if the company directors mess up, they have a risk of being put in prison as well if they fail to manage things appropriately. So I thought, that's all right. As I said, they apply to all political parties. They're driven by something called the Electoral Commission, which announces itself as the independent elections watchdog and regulator of party and election finances. And in part, it's to prevent overseas interests investing heavily in political parties and subverting the kind of national British discussion. So you'll see there are rules that the money that we have in the party should actually come from the UK, and we shouldn't be benefiting from large benefactors overseas. And that's one of the rules I have to keep an eye on. So keep clear and accurate accounting records, how we received the money, how we spent the money, what assets do we have, and also what liabilities do we have, so that we're not going to go broke unnecessarily. We have to prepare every year a statement of accounts, and we have to get them audited if we exceed spending of £250,000 in 1 year. I have a prediction to make. We're not going to exceed this limit this year. Maybe in 2 or 3 years' time, I hope that we do, and we need to be audited. But we need to keep records, and in fact, we need to keep them for 6 years. And I have a confession to make. I am not a professional accountant. I know how to use Excel to an extent, but I'm not a professional accountant. And so one question that I'm raising for general discussion, either in this room now or people watching this video afterwards, is there anybody who is a part of the party who has accounting training? Do they want to take over my amateur spreadsheets and turn them into the proper kind of double entry bookkeeping or whatever I think is done there? So that's something that is a possibility. Now, legal obligations continue. As I said, we have to track donations to know where they come from. A donation isn't just, by the way, money. It could be goods or services, and the donation counts as anything more than £500. And so we're nearly there. We nearly had £500 in donation from one individual so far. So we're getting moving. It has to be from a known source. So if I get a blank envelope passed to me, I'm not allowed to accept it. I've got to give it back to wherever I got it from. If I'm not sure where it comes from, I've got to do the best I can to hand it back. It's to prevent, as I said, the subversion of the political processes. Must be from a known source. And if there's any donation of £7,500, we have to report it at once. Not report it in the sense it's bad, but just so that the Electoral Commission keep an eye on the major funders of parties. And all this information is published for the major parties, and the same rules apply to the present minor parties, of which we are presently an example. And there are rules on loans, and there are rules separate for how much money do you spend in any individual election campaign. Then that's the legal side. But you're also interested, I'm sure, in what are we doing internally to decide how the money that you've given, donated as members or otherwise is being looked after. And we control it, and it's my job to control the spends, to make sure that people aren't going out and doing any kind of selfish or short-term thing. Now, there's no question of that happening at all yet. All the people in the executive are very honourable people, but just to be sure, there are processes in place. Sometimes we discuss them on the National Executive meeting. Shall we spend this money for this purpose? And in due course, we will have policies laid down. We don't have policies laid down for any recurring spend at all yet. And you may wonder, what have we spent the money on? We've had about 55 members in the last count, so 55 times 25, plus about the same amount of money again in donations if you work it out. What have we spent it on so far? A fair chunk was actually on registering the party. To go through the mechanism to be a proper party, that needs to be registered. Also need to make a deposit. One of the people who's going to come in a minute, hopefully, fingers crossed, has been our first election candidate. He stood in the election in May, and you have to put a deposit down. And unless you get a certain threshold of votes, you lose the deposit. Well, no surprise, we actually lost that deposit, but it's a foundation for the start. And we printed a lot of leaflets. I'm not talking about the handful of leaflets we printed today, that doesn't count as a major expense, but we printed something like 20,000 leaflets to give out in Liverpool, Walton. So that came out of funding. And a little bit of money, not very much at all, so far has been spent on IT expenses. My second question to you is, if you were guiding and advising the party, what do you think we should be spending our money on? Maybe we should be investing it for a rainy day. Should we be streamlining and improving our IT services? Should we be investing in a larger meeting room and so forth? Should we be, well, that's the suggestions which I'm looking for. Hi guys. We'll see you soon. And the final point I want to make about the Treasury Department is responsible for fundraising. And I'm looking for ideas as to how you think we should be raising money for larger projects that we might be undertaking. And the various suggestions are already on the table. We have currently a standard membership system. It's £25, everybody. Some people have said, there are lots of students who might join if it wasn't quite too expensive. Should we have a lower tier of membership? For example, I believe in the Labour Party you could pay £4 to become a member and get voting rights. So is that the kind of thing we should be looking at? Different levels of membership. Should we be more professional in identifying possible funders, keeping a track of possible funders? I'm sure major parties do this. They know the kind of people that might from time to time give money. That's a particular discipline which I don't know anything about, but some people do. Could we create and manage a set of potential donors? And then there's modern fangled ideas such as crowdfunding, which has been used very successfully. Crowdfunding, I believe, usually operates with a particular project in mind, but we could, if we have a particular project, to get behind a crowdfunding campaign. And then there's things like t-shirts. Should we be selling t-shirts? Should we be selling badges? Should we be selling hoverboards? Should we be selling, I don't know, whatever kind of Transhumanist Party literature? And should we be providing services? That's another idea, that we could help other groups of people to set up a Transhumanist Party in other parts of the world and charge services for it, or I don't know. Just a minute. So, and at this stage, I would like to introduce James. James, hi. So James, actually, you want to stand up? Everybody can see you. So James is, for the time being, has stepped into the role of actually leading the fundraising sub-department. So if you have got ideas at any of these points, if you indeed want to become part of this fundraising group, I'm not saying you have to give money, that's not the point. The point is, if you've got ideas on how, as a community, we could tap into the extended network of people who might want to be sympathetic to our cause, then by all means talk to James. So in summary, I've got 3 questions which I've laid open, and we won't discuss them now, but we might discuss them in the kind of lunch breaks or in the general Q&A later on. Does anybody have accounting training, want to join the department? What spending would you prioritize? And do you have ideas or experience with fundraising? So that's the Treasury Department. Thank you very much.